Elon Musk had conquered space, but nothing prepared him for this. Live on TV, his 5-year-old son suddenly pointed and whispered, "Daddy, who's that man with the bright light?" The studio froze. Musk saw nothing, but X did, and what happened next would stun millions and challenge everything the world believed. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Bright stage lights glowed softly above the set of the morning show. The cameras were perfectly angled, the crew ready, and a quiet hum of anticipation hovered in the air. At the center of the studio sat Elon Musk, calm and composed, dressed in his usual understated confidence. He glanced down at the notes on his lap. Bullet points about the Learning for Tomorrow Foundation, a new initiative aimed at revolutionizing education for children around the world. This was familiar ground. Interviews, presentations, vision. He had done it all 100 times. Beside him, perched on a cushioned chair a little too tall for his legs, sat his 5-year-old son, XAEA12, whom everyone simply called X. The child swung his legs slowly, hands folded in his lap, eyes scanning the room with wide, silent wonder. He was neatly dressed in a collared shirt and small sneakers, the picture of childlike curiosity wrapped in quiet poise. Across from them, host Melissa Carter greeted the audience with a warm smile. "Welcome back," she said. "We're joined this morning by Elon Musk and his rarely seen son X to discuss a groundbreaking educational initiative." Elon leaned forward to speak, but before he could begin, X lifted his arm and pointed to the far corner of the studio. "Daddy," he whispered, "who is that man with the bright light around him?" Melissa blinked in confusion, following the child's finger to what appeared to be an ordinary, empty section of the set. No staff, no camera, just a wall with a decorative painting. Elon looked too, and saw nothing. But X's expression didn't change. His fingers stayed raised, his gaze steady. The cameras kept rolling. The audience waited. And Elon Musk froze, because he saw nothing. But X saw someone. Without breaking his gaze, X pointed again toward the same corner of the studio, his small voice echoing clearly through the microphone clipped to his collar. "It's Jesus," he said. The words hit the room like a shockwave. As he loves everyone watching. The studio went silent. Melissa's polished composure faltered for just a second. Her eyes flickered toward the producer behind the camera, who stood frozen, unsure whether to cut the feed or let it roll. Elon chuckled softly, clearly trying to ease the tension. "Kids in their imaginations," he said, glancing at Melissa with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But X wasn't finished. He spoke again, this time with a calmness that seemed far too measured for his age. "Hello," says "Don't worry," X said. "He's taking care of things." The studio lights seemed suddenly warmer, the air thicker. Not a single crew member moved. Melissa attempted to recover, adjusting her cards, her voice shaky as she turned the conversation back toward Elon's foundation. But the moment had already taken root. In seconds, phones across the country lit up with video clips, tweets, and headlines. Elon Musk had changed the world with science and innovation, but nothing had prepared him for what his son had just set in motion. From the very beginning, Elon Musk had shaped his life around logic, innovation, and provable outcomes. He built systems, not stories. PayPal had redefined digital finance. Tesla had disrupted the auto industry. SpaceX had done the impossible by returning rockets safely to Earth. Neuralink sought to bridge the mind and machine. Each venture had emerged from data, equations, and an unshakable belief in human progress. Faith? It was something Elon regarded as obsolete, a relic of a less enlightened age. Religion, in his view, had always filled the gaps science hadn't yet solved. But as those gaps shrank, so did his patience for unprovable claims. He didn't need myths, he had models. He didn't need belief, he had blueprints. Even at home, Elon kept things grounded. Discussions of God or spirituality were gently deflected or ignored. He and Grimes had agreed to raise X with a focus on creative thinking, critical reasoning, and scientific discovery. That was the world he trusted. That was the universe he understood. But now, sitting under the glare of studio lights with a 5-year-old boy who claimed to see Jesus, Elon was being confronted with something logic could not contain. Something irrational, emotional, and somehow deeply real. He remembered the way his mother used to speak, not often, but always with quiet certainty. She never pushed religion, but once, after a particularly difficult launch delay, she had touched his hand and said, "There's more to life than rockets, Elon. You'll understand one day." He had brushed it off then, but the words returned now, not as a scolding, but as a whisper, gentle, persistent, unsettling. This wasn't a failed mission or a software bug. This was his son, speaking of light and love and someone watching the world. And for the first time, Elon had no formula, no framework. He could build rockets, but could he build faith? The morning after the interview, Elon's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News outlets from every continent had clipped the moment, labeling it everything from a divine encounter to a publicity stunt. Headlines splashed across every screen. Elon Musk's son sees Jesus on live TV. Child's vision goes viral, and tech giant's family enters faith spotlight. His publicist Sarah pleaded for a response, a clarification, anything to rein in the whirlwind. But Elon refused. "He's 5 years old," he said firmly. "Kids say things. This will blow over." Still, he couldn't shake the memory. X hadn't seemed confused or imaginative. He'd been calm, precise, certain, and that certainty lingered in Elon's mind like a riddle. That evening, after the house had gone quiet, Elon sat with X in the living room. He knelt beside his son, who was stacking wooden blocks into a rocket tower. His voice was gentle, curious, but careful. "Hey buddy, can I ask you something?" Elon said. X nodded. "Who exactly did you see in the studio?" X didn't hesitate. "Jesus," he said softly. He was standing near the painting. But he wasn't part of it. He was bright, like a sun, without hurting your eyes. Elon furrowed his brow. "What did he look like?" X placed a block carefully, then replied. His face looked like everyone's face at the same time. His voice didn't come from his mouth. It came from the inside, like music, in my chest. Elon stared. "Did someone teach you that?" X shook his head. "No. He told me." Trying to hide his growing unease, Elon leaned back on the couch. "Dreams can feel real sometimes," he said. "Our brains can create anything when we're asleep." "I wasn't asleep," X said quietly, eyes fixed on the blocks. "I was more awake than here." Elon swallowed. "You know, the brain can—" "Dad," X interrupted gently. "He told me things only Jesus could know." Elon paused. "Like what?" X looked up. "He said he likes watching your rockets. He said you try to go higher because something inside you is still reaching for home. And he said, you miss someone, but you pretend you don't." Elon's heart skipped. He couldn't speak. Then, without prompting, X turned and looked toward an empty corner of the room. His eyes lit up and he smiled, as if someone stood there. "Are you talking to someone?" Elon asked, his voice low. X nodded. "He's here again. He doesn't use words this time, just quiet." Elon felt a chill he couldn't explain. No hallucination or imagination felt this deliberate. His son wasn't inventing, he was remembering. "X," Elon said, reaching for his son's hand. "You're not scared?" X smiled. No, he said not to be. For a man who had built his life on the foundation of measurable data, this was the first moment where every explanation felt too thin. The most brilliant algorithms couldn't account for the way X's voice trembled with peace, or the way it shook something loose in Elon's own heart. He sat there, staring into the space his son saw something in, torn between everything he had always believed and what was now unfolding in his own living room. Elon had spent decades chasing certainty, erecting his empire on logic and evidence. But now, that foundation quivered beneath the voice of a child who saw light in empty corners. Elon had built his life on certainty until his son spoke with divine clarity. Elon Musk canceled every meeting for the rest of the week. He told his team he was overwhelmed with media noise, which wasn't untrue, but it wasn't the whole truth either. What haunted him wasn't the crowd outside his house or the endless press requests. It was the stillness of his son's voice, the calm certainty in the way he had said, "He told me things only Jesus could know." For 2 nights straight, Elon barely slept. He sat alone in his study, reviewing the security footage from the day X spoke on live television. Frame by frame, he watched the moment where his son looked beyond the camera and smiled at nothing. Or rather, at something only he could see. But what truly shook Elon came hours later, in footage from X's bedroom. The video showed X standing by the window in his pajamas, waving gently down at someone below. Elon zoomed in on the feed. There on the street stood a man, middle-aged, dressed simply, holding a small satchel and looking up at the house like he had been invited. No signs, no camera crew, just a quiet presence. When Elon asked security who the man was, they said, "A pastor, Michael Jennings. Says he came because X told him to." Elon hesitated, then gave the order. "Let him in." When Pastor Jennings entered the room, he didn't look like a man chasing attention. His jeans were worn, his shoes dusty from the road. His eyes, though tired, held something serene. "I know how this sounds," the pastor said softly, "but I had a dream about your son. He told me to come, that he needed help explaining what he saw." Elon was silent for a moment, then called for X. When the boy walked in, his face lit up. "Pastor Mike," he said, running to the man with the comfort of an old friend. Elon blinked in disbelief. "X, how do you know this man?" "Jesus said he would come," X replied. "He said Pastor Mike would help you understand." They all sat down in the living room. Pastor Jennings asked X gentle questions, not leading or probing, just listening. X responded with calm detail, describing the face of Jesus, not like the paintings, but as someone with bronze-toned skin, dark curly hair, and eyes that looked like they'd seen every person ever born. "El didn't talk with his mouth," X said, "but I heard him anyway. He asked me what I wanted to bring back. I didn't know how to answer, but I felt like he already knew." Elon leaned forward, his breathing quiet, eyes narrowed. Not in doubt, but in awe. These weren't recycled ideas or Sunday school fables. They were strange and specific and strangely correct. "Hell showed me a place," X continued, "where the trees didn't need sunlight. The rivers flowed up instead of down, and everyone was made of light. But they all remembered me." Pastor Jennings looked over at Elon. "This isn't the first child I've heard say things like this, but it's never this clear, never this whole." Later that night, Elon sat in his study with the lights dimmed, watching the fire flicker in the hearth. He sipped from a glass he couldn't remember pouring and stared out the window at the stars, the same stars he had spent his life reaching for. "Have I been so blind in my certainty?" he wondered. "I've built rockets, conquered frontiers, but maybe the greatest frontier isn't out there. Maybe it's within." When Pastor Jennings entered quietly to say goodnight, Elon turned to him and asked, "Do you really think my son saw something?" The pastor didn't hesitate. "I do. And not just something. Something beyond imagination." And in that moment, Elon realized his rational mind had finally met its limit. Morning broke with a quiet tension over Elon Musk's estate. Outside, a crowd of thousands had gathered. Media vans, worshippers, skeptics, and curious onlookers, all drawn by the viral moment that had already consumed the world. Inside, Elon stood in front of the mirror, straightening his collar. His eyes were heavy, his jaw tight. He had made his decision. He stepped into the hallway where Sarah, his longtime communications director, was waiting with a stack of carefully prepared statements. "This is the version the lawyers approved," she said. "It addresses the situation delicately. No admissions, no controversy, just acknowledgement and a plea for privacy." Elon took the paper, folded it once, and slipped it into his coat pocket without reading it. Pastor Jennings offered him a gentle nod. "Are you sure you're ready?" "No," Elon replied. "But I'm going anyway." The impromptu press area in front of the house buzzed with voices, camera clicks, and flashing lights. As he stepped onto the platform, microphones pointed like spears toward his face. A hush rippled through the crowd. He looked out at the sea of expectant faces, at the signs, the reporters, the pilgrims, and the skeptics. He took a breath, reached into his pocket, and pulled out the speech, but then set it down on the podium. "I had something prepared," he began, his voice steady but soft. "Something safe, something polished. But I'm not going to read it." The crowd held still. Sarah looked horrified. "I'm here because of my son," Elon continued. "You've all seen the clip. You've all heard what he said. And now you want me to explain it." He paused. "The truth is, I can't. I don't know what he saw. I don't know if it was a vision or a dream or something beyond all that. I don't even know what I believe about it." He looked down, swallowed hard. "But I know my son, and I know he doesn't lie." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Elon pressed forward. "For most of my life, I've believed in evidence, in logic, in what can be built and tested. I've built rockets, cars, artificial intelligence, things that rely on precision. But nothing prepared me for the moment when my 5-year-old looked into a camera and said he saw Jesus." His voice wavered slightly now. "I've never taken religion seriously. I've dismissed it as myth, as wishful thinking. But then my son started saying things he had no way of knowing, things that rattled even me." He scanned the crowd again. "And maybe that's the point. Maybe this isn't something to explain. Maybe it's something to feel, to consider." From behind him, the front door creaked open. X stood quietly in the entryway, barefoot, still in his pajamas, a blanket draped over his shoulders. The crowd gasped. 1,000 cameras swiveled toward him. And then, he smiled. He pointed to a spot just off the side of the podium, his face lighting up like he'd just seen an old friend. "He's here," X whispered. Instantly, several cameras glitched. Static fuzzed across the screens. Technicians scrambled. For a brief moment, the feed blinked into white. Elon turned, eyes wide, but saw nothing. Only his son, staring into empty space and beaming. The crowd didn't know what to do. Some clapped. Others stood frozen in awe. A few wept quietly. Elon turned back to the microphone. "I don't know what just happened. But I do know this. Maybe, just maybe, there are things bigger than us, and maybe that's okay." He stepped back from the podium, his hands trembling, heart pounding. Elon Musk, the titan of industry, the scientist, the skeptic, had just stood before the world and publicly embraced mystery. The house had finally grown quiet. The crowd outside had dispersed. The cameras had been turned off, and for the first time in what felt like days, there was stillness. Elon sat on the edge of the couch, elbows resting on his knees, fingers laced. The press conference had been exhausting, but not because of the words he had spoken. It was what they stirred inside of him. Across the room, X sat curled up with his stuffed owl, quietly humming the same mysterious melody he'd been humming since the television appearance. Elon turned to him. "S," he said softly, "can I ask you something?" The boy looked up, blinking sleepily. "Okay." "Why you?" Elon asked, his voice gentle, almost breaking. "Why did Jesus choose to speak to you?" X didn't hesitate. "Because kids still listen." Elon frowned. "What do you mean?" The child shrugged. "Adults stopped listening a long time ago. They hear, but they don't really listen. Jesus said kids still do." Elon sat back, staring at his son as if seeing him for the first time. There was no pride in X's tone, no desire for attention, just truth, simple, pure, and powerful. It hit him like a wave. All his life, Elon had chased forward motion, built systems, solved problems, created the future. But in the process, he had drowned out something softer, something deeper. The quiet wisdom that sometimes speaks not through noise, but through stillness, through the innocence of a child. Pastor Jennings entered the room, his presence unobtrusive. He stood by the doorway, observing the father and son in silence. Then he spoke, his voice low and kind. "Faith isn't certainty, Elon," he said. "It's accepting the journey, even when you don't know where it leads." Elon didn't speak for a while. He nodded slowly, the words settling into him like seeds in warm soil. "I thought I had to know everything," he murmured, "to be in control, to have answers." "You don't," Pastor Jennings said simply. "You just have to be present." Elon turned back to X, who was now drawing something on a folded napkin with a purple crayon. A doorway floating in the sky. "Is that for me?" Elon asked. X looked up, nodded. "He said to tell you, the door opens when you stop trying to unlock it." A small broken laugh escaped Elon's lips, half joy, half surrender. And in that moment, something shifted. Not a conversion, not a revelation, but something gentler. A release. He no longer felt the burden to understand everything. He didn't need to categorize it or explain it or file it away in the archives of logic. He only needed to listen. Elon realized faith wasn't the absence of questions. It was finding peace in them. Days had passed since the world erupted around them. The headlines kept coming, but Elon had stopped reading them. He no longer felt the need to manage the narrative, correct the commentary, or control the chaos. Instead, he sat quietly in his study, reviewing a set of new proposals, not for satellites or Mars, bound missions, but for anonymous funding programs that would support orphanages, rural clinics, and silent sanctuaries for the forgotten. He signed them one by one, no logos, no interviews, no fanfare, only impact. In the living room, X built a small tower of blocks, balancing each piece with steady hands and quiet focus. His stuffed owl watched beside him, nestled on the rug like always. The boy didn't seem to care that the world had labeled him a prophet, a miracle, or a mystery. He just hummed softly, deeply at peace, as if nothing in the universe could trouble him. Elon watched him for a long moment, heart full in a way he didn't quite understand. He lowered his head and whispered under his breath, "Help me listen," like he does. X looked up from his tower and smiled casually. "Jesus says you're doing okay, Dad." Then he returned to his toys without another word. Elon didn't ask how he knew. He didn't try to explain it away. He just smiled. And this time, it wasn't the kind of smile meant for cameras or conferences. It was the kind of smile that came from somewhere sacred, somewhere quiet. He sat back in his chair, hands resting calmly in his lap. No words, no equations, no need to solve. Because Elon Musk had found a miracle, not in the stars, but in a child's heart. Elon Musk no longer felt the need to issue statements or correct headlines. He found more meaning in quiet gestures, in anonymous donations, in long walks with X, and in evenings spent simply listening. One morning, he opened his journal and wrote just one sentence. Maybe truth isn't what we can prove, but what we can feel. Later that afternoon, X handed him a new drawing. It showed Jesus standing on a launch pad, smiling as he held two rockets, one in each hand. At the bottom, in careful block letters, X had written, "He likes your rockets, Dad." Elon didn't laugh. He didn't analyze. He framed the picture without a word and placed it by his desk, between his star maps and mission blueprints, where he could see it every day. And in that small, sacred space between wonder and reason, something in him settled. A child's vision had reminded Elon Musk that sometimes the greatest discovery isn't out there in the cosmos, but within our own hearts. Subscribe for more inspiring stories about faith, love, and the moments that change everything. Because what if children still see clearly what adults have forgotten how to?